Hello everyone, this is a video about decolonization and colonization. Colonization has been a pivotal force in shaping the modern world, characterized by the control and settlement of one country by another. It has historically involved the domination of foreign territories for economic exploitation, cultural imposition, and strategic advantage. The legacy of colonization has left indelible marks on societies across the globe, influencing everything from national borders to cultural identities, languages, and economic structures. Decolonization, on the other hand, is the process through which colonized countries achieve independence, either through diplomatic means, political negotiations, or armed struggle. However, decolonization extends beyond mere political sovereignty. It encompasses a broader social, cultural, and psychological process of liberating a society from the oppressive structures and ideologies imposed by colonial rule. This involves reasserting and revitalizing indigenous cultures, languages, and governance systems that were suppressed under colonial dominance. On the definition of colonization and decolonization. Colonization has been extensively studied in the fields of history, sociology, and post-colonial studies. One prominent figure in understanding colonization, especially from a cultural perspective, is Edward Said. In his seminal work, Orientalism, Said discusses how Western colonial powers dominated and reshaped the cultures of the East through ideological and cultural means, which he terms as Orientalism. This concept illustrates the pattern of misrepresentation and domination that is central to the process of colonization. Decolonization, according to Frantz Fanon, involves a violent struggle, as he argues that the colonized can reclaim their identity and humanity only through a complete rejection and often violent resistance against the colonizer. Fanon's view on decolonization is revolutionary, emphasizing the need for a radical restructuring of society to eradicate colonial influences.
Exploration and colonization in modern history. This period, starting from the 15th century, marked significant European maritime exploration aimed at discovering new trade routes and territories. These explorations led to the extensive colonization of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The colonizers established control over vast lands and began exploiting the local resources and people, which laid the foundation for widespread global disparities. And there are a lot of reasons why colonize. Right. The primary motivations for colonization were economic gain, religious evangelization, and national glory. European powers sought to expand their wealth by accessing new markets and exploiting natural resources. Religious motivations were also significant, as many colonial expeditions were accompanied by Christian missionaries aiming to convert indigenous populations. The notion of the civilizing mission was used to justify these actions, promoting the idea that European governance, religion, and culture were superior and beneficial for the colonized societies. Colonization was also hugely destructive to the colonies. The arrival of colonizers often resulted in the genocide of indigenous populations, either through direct violence or through the spread of diseases to which native peoples had no immunity. Alongside physical genocide, colonizers committed epistemicide, destroying and devaluing indigenous knowledge systems. The imposition of European educational systems and languages eroded native traditions and languages, leading to a loss of indigenous identities and wisdom. Two important ideas had a huge impact on colonization. Francis Bacon's assertion that knowledge is power influenced colonial strategies that prioritized the accumulation of information about colonized lands to enhance control and exploitation. René Descartes' philosophy of I think, therefore I am contributed to the emphasis on Western rationality and intellectualism, often at the expense of indigenous ways of knowing, which were frequently dismissed as superstition or myth. On Cartesian dualism and its enlightenment, egoism, Descartes' notion of the self as distinct and separate from the world fostered a worldview that prioritized individual gain, which was mirrored in the colonial exploitation strategies. Anthropocentrism. This view places humans above nature, justifying the environmental degradation that occurred under colonial rule as lands were cleared and resources extracted for profit. Eurocentrism. The belief in European cultural and intellectual superiority led to the imposition of European values and systems on colonized peoples. Anthropogenic. The human-centric view of impacting nature often disregarded traditional ecological balances and sustainable practices of indigenous peoples. Post-colonial theory. developed by scholars like Homi Bhabha and Gayatri Spivak, critiques the lasting impacts of colonialism and questions the narratives that have historically justified colonization. This field emphasizes the need to hear the voices of the previously colonized and to re-examine historical narratives to include their perspectives and experiences. There is also much to be said about non-colonization. Self-identity. Rebuilding individual identities that honor indigenous cultures rather than colonial stereotypes. National identity. Forming a collective identity that reflects the nation's diverse cultural heritage and post-colonial realities. Ecological man. Advocating for sustainable living practices that harmonize with local ecological systems and traditional indigenous knowledge. Local genius. Encouraging local innovation that caters to specific cultural and environmental contexts. Traditions versus secularism. Balancing the revival of traditional practices with the principles of secular governance to foster inclusive societies. Occidentalism versus Orientalism. Challenging the simplistic division of the world into East and West and promoting a more integrated global understanding.
In Asia, the process can be divided into 3 stages. The first stage was in the 15th and 16th centuries when Portugal and Spain were the main invaders. They established trading posts in Asia, controlling trade routes and making huge profits from silk and spice trade. The second stage was in the 17th and 18th centuries when countries like England, the Netherlands, and France became the main invaders in Asia, especially England and the Netherlands. England mainly colonized India through the East India Company, using military aggression, direct land grabbing, forced taxation, cultivating and smuggling opium, creating conflicts, and inciting Indians against each other to accumulate a large amount of capital. Dutch colonists established the Batavia colony, occupying the entire Indonesia, and at one point occupying Taiwan, pushing the Portuguese out of the Indian Ocean, becoming the carriers of the sea. France followed suit by establishing the East India Company, mainly in the Indian Peninsula and the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. It is worth noting that during this period, Tsarist Russia became a transcontinental empire through large-scale territorial expansion, with Siberia being the main focus in Asia. The third stage began in the late 18th century and continued into the early 20th century. With the progress and expansion of the Industrial Revolution, from the late 18th century onwards, Britain, France, and other colonizers accelerated their expansion in Asia. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, most of Asia had become colonies or semi-colonies. In the mid to late 19th century, the entire Indian subcontinent, including Afghanistan, became a British colony. By the end of the 19th century, Britain had occupied most of Burma and the Malay Peninsula. France, with the help of the Sino-French War, occupied Vietnam, Laos, and Burma in Indochina. The United States, through military force, took the Philippines from Spain.
Finally, we need to know. Decolonization is a vital process for addressing historical injustices and promoting equitable and sustainable development globally. It requires a multifaceted effort across cultural, political, and economic domains to overcome the pervasive effects of colonialism. Decolonization is a complex and multifaceted process that extends beyond the cessation of direct political control. It encompasses the restoration of indigenous cultures, languages, and traditions, the restructuring of educational and historical narratives, and the economic and environmental revitalization based on principles of equity and sustainability. The ongoing journey of decolonization is not only about correcting historical wrongs but also about creating a future that respects and integrates the diverse cultural, social, and ecological landscapes of our global community. Thank you for watching.